Hi, my name is Katrina Gaiman, and I am consulting as a Lessons Learned Analyst here at the Peacekeeping and Stability Operations Institute. It is my pleasure to be with you today to provide an overview of Europe's migration and refugee crisis. I would first like to acknowledge that dilemmas in trade-offs for migration have politically split communities here in the United States and abroad. In this climate, and given that conflicts driving displacement continue, it is important for each of us to become more informed. On that note, I would like to begin this overview by asking you to take a moment to reflect on this image. If you were forced to flee from your home, who would you carry with you, and what would you leave behind? This photo was taken by Human Rights Watch in October 2015 on the Greek island of Lesbos as a boatload of asylum seekers and migrants arrived from Turkey. Europe's crisis comes at a time when global displacement is at an all-time high, surpassing levels post-World War II. According to the UN Refugee Agency, over 65 million people are currently forcibly displaced due to violent conflict, persecution, and human rights abuse, not including those displaced due to poverty or climate change. Of these 65 million, the majority are displaced within their own countries, while over 21 million have fled beyond borders to seek international protection as refugees. As shown on the chart, of the total people displaced worldwide, Europe only hosts about 6%. This map from the International Organization for Migration shows primary migration routes taken for migrants and asylum seekers towards Europe. As evident on the chart, people flee to Europe from ongoing conflicts in Syria, Afghanistan, and Iraq, as well as persecution in Pakistan, Eritrea, and Nigeria, among others. As you can see, the highest percentage of those fleeing to Europe are from Syria. So, to understand Europe's refugee crisis, it is necessary to first consider the Syrian refugee crisis. I will spend the remainder of this brief highlighting issues of displacement within Syria, the surrounding region, and how this has affected spillover into Europe. As I'm sure you are aware, violent conflict erupted in Syria in 2011. Since then, half of Syria's pre-war population has been killed or forced to flee, a total of 11 million people. Over 6 million of those are displaced within Syria itself, as shown on this map, with almost 1 million besieged. Schools, medical facilities, markets, and other infrastructure have been destroyed. The protection of civilian situation is dire, especially in the city of Aleppo, which was described by the former UN Secretary General as worse than a slaughterhouse. Humanitarian access has been largely blocked, with a UN convoy bombed in September. As the conflict continues, more people continue to be displaced, including 116,000 more from Aleppo this December. In addition to those displaced within Syria, 4.8 million Syrians have fled to the surrounding region, primarily in 5 neighboring countries: Turkey, the world's top host of refugees with numbers approaching 3 million, Lebanon, in which about 1 of 4 people is a Syrian refugee, Jordan, Egypt, and Iraq. The first refugee camp to open for Syrians was Zaatari in Jordan in 2012. The UN estimates that only 1 in 10 Syrian refugees live in camps. Others live in urban communities or unofficial tent settlements. These refugees join previous refugees in the region from Palestine and the Iraq War. Due to the influx, there has been an enormous strain on the region. Lebanon's economy has suffered. 170,000 people have fallen into poverty, according to the World Bank. Jordan is experiencing a massive water shortage. 700,000 refugee children are not attending formal education, while schools across the region are doing double shifts to accommodate the children who do. Work permits have not been made available to many refugees, and so Syrian refugees who fled initially have depleted their savings over the course of 5 years of war, and some have now been forced to resort to child labor and child marriages. Many refugees have experienced trauma, and local populations are struggling amidst the strain. While initially Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey were extraordinarily generous with the influx, they began to restrict their borders by mid-2014 due to the strain. The UN has been working to reduce strain in the region, alongside coordinated regional partners through the 3RP plan, but their efforts remain grossly underfunded. The UN Refugee Agency has estimated that 10% of those in the surrounding region need resettlement elsewhere. However, according to Oxfam, less than 3% of Syrian refugees have actually arrived in rich countries through resettlement programs. The primary legal framework obligating states to assist refugees is the 1951 Convention and 1967 Protocol relating to the status of refugees. This treaty gives refugees the right to seek international protection, as well as the right to not be returned to a country where they may be persecuted, known as the principle of non-refoulement. Not all states are signatories to this convention, including many Gulf states, as evident in red on this chart. So several of these nations have not officially taken in Syrian refugees under the auspices of the United Nations, although they may still host some displaced persons. Even for nations who do accept refugees, there are often barriers, such as national quotas and lengthy security, screening, vetting processes, which can take 2 years in the United States. For reference, in FY16, the U.S. admitted about 12,500 Syrian refugees. Prior to that, only about 2,200 were resettled in the U.S. since the start of the Syrian civil war. Given the regional strain and lack of resettlement options, Europe has become a primary destination for Syrians who hope to physically reach the continent in order to claim asylum. However, there are a lack of safe and legal routes for asylum seekers to get to Europe. Initially, Syrians were crossing by land into Greece. However, Europe responded by building fences, a total of over 200 kilometers, first closing off the border between Turkey and Greece. Migration routes then shifted to Bulgaria, until fences closed that border off in 2014. These fences did not stop the flow of migrants and refugees, but instead diverted them to more dangerous sea routes. In 2015, over 1 million migrants came to Europe by sea, almost 4 times the number who came by land and sea total in 2014. Half of all people crossing the Mediterranean in 2015 were Syrian, over 500,000 people. The year 2016 saw another 360,000 migrants cross the sea. You can see in the map to the upper right the 3 main routes across the Mediterranean: Morocco to Spain, Northern Africa to Italy, and Turkey to Greece across the Aegean. Conditions for the Mediterranean crossing have been very unsafe. Smugglers routinely overload unseaworthy boats, and some asylum seekers have faced illegal pushbacks between the borders of Turkey and Greece upon arrival. There have also been numerous tragedies at sea. The year 2016 surpassed 2015 as the most deaths at sea, with over 5,000 for last year alone. In response, Europe launched 4 main sea operations. Italy's Mare Nostrum focused on search and rescue, saving 150,000 lives at sea. Due to costs, however, it was shut down and replaced by operations focusing more on border protection, after which the death toll increased. Once migrants and asylum seekers and refugees reach Europe, there are other significant challenges. This graph shows again the contrast in numbers between refugees hosted in the region surrounding Syria and those in Europe. In 2015, European Union member states received over 1 million new asylum applications, about half to Germany and Sweden. Now, 26 nations in Europe form the Schengen region, free of internal border controls. For this region, the Dublin regulation places primary responsibility for asylum seekers on the first country of entry. This has overwhelmed Italy and Greece due to arrivals from the Mediterranean, despite an agreement in 2015 to relocate some of them to other countries. Europe is currently divided politically about how to handle this crisis, with various approaches taken, ranging from Germany's open door policy, in which the Angela Merkel government accepted over 400,000 applications for asylum in 2015, to the EU-Turkey deal of this past March, crafted to reduce routes for people to enter the European Union. Main concerns driving the debate in Europe between welcoming refugees and pushing them back include, first of all, security. Many Europeans fear the possibility of increased terrorism or increased crime. A study by the German government released about a year ago reported that the crime rate for refugees was the same as that of the native German population. However, this came 1 month before the myriad reports of sexual assaults in Cologne, Germany last New Year's Eve, which some of the perpetrators were said to be refugees. This highlights another primary area of concern for Europeans: social issues. There are many cultural differences between some refugees coming to Europe and Europeans, including conceptions of gender equality and women's rights. While some Europeans feel threatened, other citizens and non-governmental organizations have stepped up volunteer efforts to care for refugees, from staffing makeshift camps to supporting independent search and rescue at sea. This is not to mention the continued challenges that refugees themselves face upon arrival to Europe, including submitting asylum claims, documentation, family reunification, community integration, jobs, housing, education, language barriers, etc. Addressing challenges faced by both refugees and by host communities is essential in order to increase stability. According to a 2015 RAND study, based on 9 historical cases of refugees fleeing violence across the world, quote, "Poverty and physical deprivation have less impact on the degree of radicalization than actions or omissions on the part of the international community and of the receiving country. The risk can be mitigated if the main stakeholders adopt comprehensive policies that extend beyond immediate life-saving needs and address such issues as refugees' impact on the countries that host them. As such, the international community can play a part in both welcoming refugees and supporting host communities, and in that way potentially reduce the risk for radicalization towards extremism." As you have heard today, Europe's migration and refugee crisis is impacted by the Syrian refugee crisis, bringing dilemmas, challenges, and opportunities for response. If you'd like to learn more about efforts and recommendations for response to this crisis, please see the Solemn Sampler Lessons Learned publication on refugees and internally displaced persons. Thank you.